Topping the bestseller list since its release on Steam and just crossing the million sales mark, Mordhau loosely translates to Murder Strike, and that should give you a hint of what you're in for when you play this game. It's a multiplayer medieval melee combat game featuring large open battles, siege engines, and mounted combat, all there to let you carve your way across medieval battlefields. It draws on the combat systems of popular games like Mount and Blade and Chivalry Medieval Warfare to bring to life a frantic melee with up to 64 players with a leveling progression system that keeps you playing just one more game late into the night. But the game's real standout feature is the depth of its character customization, which allows for near endless combinations, and most importantly, none of it is locked behind microtransactions, DLC, or loot boxes of any kind as of the writing of this review. And all of this comes for only $30 from the first-time publisher Triternion, so it's an easy recommendation for a game. As of now, the game is divided into 3 game modes. Horde mode, which has you take on increasingly difficult waves of NPC enemies. You kill them to gain gold and spend it to buy new weapons. It's a less scary version of Call of Duty Zombies, except nobody plays this mode, so you'll be doing it alone. Battle Royale, which works like every other Battle Royale mode copied and pasted from the last 2 years. You start naked and then run around and open chests. If you're lucky, you'll find one that has a sword in it, or armor, or sometimes even a horse. But if not, you'll run around naked and then die before ever finding something useful. So, standard Battle Royale fare. And the final and most popular mode is Frontline, which works just like the Frontline game mode from the Battlefield series. 2 opposing teams push across a valley and capture points along the way before assaulting a final gate guarded by an NPC boss. All the while, the amount of respawns your team has available constantly ticks down at the top of the screen. It feels similar to Overwatch or Alterac Valley from classic World of Warcraft, but in a good way. But the real difference here is you're swinging around actual medieval weapons, portrayed mostly accurately. There's no beams of magic or fantasy flourishes. Instead, it's a true meat grinder, where the best players are the ones who often just survive the longest. Weapons in the game are judged based on their damage, speed, and reach, and each moves in a way that feels unique and weighty. The game gives you a tutorial to go over the basics of combat, but don't let the absolutely atrocious English voice accent deter you.
Look at what the cat dragged in.
You just left-click your mouse and move it in a direction, and your sword swings that way. You can also scroll up to stab, and though they forget to mention it in the tutorial, you can also scroll down for an overhead chop. The only thing stopping you from swinging and parrying to your heart's content is that you'll run out of stamina, in which case your attacks slow down and your weapon will literally be swatted out of your hand if you go to block. Combined with a button to feint, the ability to string combos together, and a timed parry system, you got yourself a combat system that requires surprising amounts of precision, timing, and positioning, and can lead to some really tense duels that go back and forth with undeniable skill. There are also horses in the game, and yes, you can couch a lance to impale anyone in your way or trample them if you miss. And most players just kill the horse rather than try and take it for themselves. The real new addition Mordhau brings to this tried and true combat system is that pressing R enables an alternate weapon mode. For some, this just means that you'll throw the weapon you have in your hand after a 1-second delay, which can be pretty fun. For others, it opens up extra utility. The longsword is flipped around and held by the blade, so you can strike armored opponents with the crossguard, the eponymous Mordhau technique. Two-handed swords are held in the half-sword position for faster movement at the cost of damage, which is especially a useful choice in close spaces or near friendly units where you can't be swinging your sword around like a lunatic. Which brings us to friendly fire. Mordhau's biggest change from previous games of this type is just how easy it is to kill your own teammates. When you swing that sword of yours in a great big arc, it catches everything around it. And I do mean everything. Collide with walls, collide with posts, collide with your teammate who doesn't take kindly to dying from a noob. And they will retaliate. But you can choose different types of character class to play in-game. Some preset builds are available to you from the get-go, but you can also create your own custom characters using a point system similar to Call of Duty Black Ops. Everything has a value: weapons, armor, perks, and you add it all up to reach the magic number. You can combine the perks, arms, and armor to build period-accurate warriors, from the Battle of Hastings to Agincourt, Viking warriors, Italian mercenaries, and Renaissance dandies. And that's part of the game's charm. With nearly a millennia of panoply at your disposal, you can build near anything. And did I mention this was all in the base game? As someone who spent more time creating characters in Skyrim than playing it, it's refreshing that Mordhau is cut from the same cloth, though at the moment your player is limited to various shades of white European male when creating them, which doesn't matter much since you'll normally be covered in so much armor you couldn't get a decent tan anyway. But I've seen several posts online that other skin tones shouldn't ever be included, as Europe at the time was largely homogenous. And seeing as how this is a fantasy world that conflates 1,000 years of military combat, that argument really doesn't hold water. The game has as much in common with actual military tactics as paintball. Enforcing this exclusionist thought process closes off the possibility of adding new locations in the Middle East, Asia, and North Africa, as well as a whole host of other cultures that interacted with medieval Europe. I mean, you could technically even offer new world maps, as 1492 falls within the game's purview. On that same note, the developers have stated they're actively working to implement a female character model, which was included as one of the original Kickstarter goals for the game. But to keep the darker corners of the internet from rising up against them, the development team is delaying this until they can offer the ability to locally toggle off whether female fighters will actually appear in your own game, meaning that they'll still be female, but you can just put your head in the sand and ignore it. If you can't tell, I'm getting really tired of covering the same story every time a new pseudo-historic game releases. First The Witcher, then Kingdom Come Deliverance, now this. This wasn't a thing when Skyrim released, and nobody has ever said a cross word about these same features in Mount & Blade. I mean, if this ahistorical abomination doesn't bother you, how can anything? And it's to the credit of Mordhau's developers that they haven't backed down on adding new customization options and have instead chosen to largely ignore the outrage and focus instead on supporting a solid game. From the satisfying thunk of a warhammer landing home to the ringing ping of a headshot from a longbow, there's a lot to love in Mordhau, and it stands as a solid set of bones to build on, with hopefully new maps and some less derivative game modes in the future. Personally, I'd love to see a tourney mode, where 30 knights on horseback square against 30 others in a small field, with only one life to live. Winner take all. And that's the cool thing about indie publishers. It might happen. They tend to offer you something you never even knew you wanted. So if this sounds like the kind of game you're into, then I'll see you on the battlefield. Thanks for watching.